Hello friends, it's Miss Dom, and today in my quest to find art materials that I think you have handy that aren't special materials you have to order from an art catalog or something, I decided to play around with what you can do with pasta. So pasta, it's basically any kind of stiff, and so if you don't have a parent handy that can help you with this, you can do this with just using the uncooked pasta. You can break it into whatever size you need, and then use glue and glue it down and create whatever design you want for your faux embossed project. So embossing is an ancient technique. People have been doing it for a long time, where you press into metal and create designs. But we're going to actually be using aluminum foil, and instead of pressing into it, if you press into aluminum foil too much, it tends to tear. We're going to create a raised surface to put the foil over, and then just gently press down over that raised surface. So this is my example that I made. You'll notice that you see curving lines. So as I got started with this, I like curving lines, and so I decided to see what would happen if I cooked the pasta. So I've got some pasta here, and if you decide to cook the pasta, there's some pluses and minuses with it. First of all, don't do it by yourself. Make sure you have a parent supervising you with this, because it does involve using the stove and boiling water, and those things are dangerous if there isn't an adult around. So if there's no adult around, you would need to ask your parents about using your pasta anyway. But pasta is fairly inexpensive. Most people have it as a staple in their pantry, so I figured it was something that you could find and use. And again, if you're not able to cook it, you don't have to. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about different ways that you can do this embossing technique using other materials besides pasta. But again, pasta was my inspiration today as far as trying to find an art material that's versatile and available at home, something that you might not always think of as being something you'd want to create art with. So this, as you can see, this is what I used, and I did this a couple hours ago. It's not totally dry yet, but it has dried slightly. It's kind of rubbery, but that's kind of how you want it in order to do this. So when I cooked the pasta, I didn't cook it all the way. I cooked it for about 5 minutes, or about half the time that you would need. Normally it takes about 10 minutes or so, depending on what type of pasta it is. So if it's a linguine, you have to cook it a little longer. If it's angel hair pasta, it's thinner. You have to cook it a little less. But you don't want to cook it for the full amount of time you would if you were going to eat it. So when I was working with this, right now it's pretty soft, but when I was working with it, when I broke it, it actually had a little bit of a snap because it wasn't completely cooked all the way through. And so what you want is something that's not mushy. If you cook it too much, it gets mushy. What you want it to be is a little bit sticky and bendable. Okay, so as soon as it's bendable, and then once it's cooled off a little bit, it should be sticky. I liked the fact that it was sticky, because if you look in the pictures on this slide, you'll see that I put the pasta onto a piece of cardboard. Now, if I look at the back of this, it's actually a box from Cheerios, and I used it with one of my other projects where I was painting, and I still have some paint on the back, but I used the plain cardboard side of it, and you can see in the picture, I just laid that spaghetti out, and as I was playing with it, I decided to try and make a bird, and then I added the tree, and then I added some clouds. I did a kind of a bird that's a little further away, looks a little more abstract, and then another one that's even further away. And so you don't have to do a bird. You can do something else. If you're not boiling the pasta, if that's not an option for you, a house might be a good idea, or even just a symmetrical design. You could do your name. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what to make, You can just kind of play around with it, or you can draw on the cardboard if you want to plan ahead. And so again, the idea of what you're going, what the image or what the inspiration is up to you. I'm just showing you kind of an interesting technique that you can do with materials you have at home. So the pasta is fairly sticky when it's wet, so you don't need much. I didn't use any glue at all. I just stuck it and pressed it onto the cardboard. The only problem was it also stuck to my fingers a little bit, but the partially boiled pasta is very sticky. You don't really need a lot of glue. The only glue I used was around, if you look in the picture that I took, I put a little glue near the edges and a few little spots just to make sure that the foil stuck to the cardboard, okay, because the foil isn't naturally sticky like the pasta is. So I put a little bit of glue on there just to hold that foil on. If you're using the dry pasta and you're using straight lines, you will need to use some glue, of course, to attach it to the cardboard. Now, other options for this technique that people have done, I've seen this done with buttons, I've seen it done with leaves, anything, even cutting up the cardboard into shapes, anything that has just a little bit of thickness and texture to it. It can't be too lumpy bumpy, but if it's semi-flat and has an interesting texture, it can work. So, like the pasta is fairly thin, doesn't stick up a lot, but it does create that bump. And so that bump is what's going to give you that look of it being embossed. So you can see all these little lines are pasta. Now, the way that I made it stand out a little bit more, you'll also see in the picture, I took a picture of it after I put the foil on and it was all really shiny. And because it was so shiny, it was a little bit hard to see the texture because of all the shine. So what I did was I did sort of an aged patina with just some inexpensive acrylic black paint. And so I just, you may have to do a couple layers of this. I put some on with a cotton ball at first and rubbed it on there, and then I used a paper towel and rubbed a lot of it off. And then I felt like I needed a little bit more, so then I used a brush and rubbed it on there, and then again I went back and rubbed a little bit off. So you can use a paintbrush, you can use a cotton ball, you can, however you want to get it on there. And the idea is to put the paint on there, rub it so that the raised areas shine a little bit more, and that's going to take some of the paint off. So you'll notice it's not really black, but that black paint just dulls out the areas that are not sticking out and makes them stand out a little bit more. Okay, so that is the foil embossing. Most of you have aluminum foil at home. Most of you probably have pasta. And the cardboard, most of you have cardboard boxes that you can cut up and use. So you may or may not have the acrylic paint. If you don't have to use acrylic paint. You can use a permanent marker if you want to make this stand out more or color inside the shapes that you make. That's another option. Just be careful. You want to use one that's not super pointy. Again, you don't want to puncture that foil. Okay. Or you can just leave it shiny. Another thing that some people do is they'll crumble the aluminum foil up and then flatten it out, and that gives a different look. But I use the acrylic paint just to make that embossing, make that texture stand out just a little bit more. All right, so other experiments that I did with pasta that you can try if you want to, I made a little pasta sculpture. And so it's just messing around with that sticky pasta. So I used some of the uncooked pasta because it was stiff to get, hold it up. And then I sort of wove and wrapped some of the cooked pasta into it. So you could sort of experiment with that idea of sculpting with the pasta. And then I'm just letting this dry so that eventually that pasta that was soft will harden. And then maybe I could paint it, maybe I could add other things to it. but just kind of playing with the idea of using pasta as an art medium. So hopefully you're inspired to try one or some of the things I just talked about. Again, you don't have to do a bird. That's just what I decided to do. You can, you know, make it abstract with just shapes. You can put your name. You can do a house. You can do, you know, whatever inspires you or whatever you want to do. But I just wanted you to think about how you can use supplies that you have at home to try some different and interesting techniques to create art. So if you want, go ahead and give it a try. You might want to even, if this is something that you want to keep, cut your cardboard to fit maybe an old frame that you have so that when you're done, you can put it in the frame and then instant art you can put on your wall. So good luck with that. Give it a try. Like I said, you don't need a lot of expensive supplies. The pasta should be sticky. If you cook it, if you don't cook it, you just need a little glue, and then you'll just be using straight lines. But again, do check with your parents. Ask them, you know, if you can use a few pieces of dry pasta. Ask them if they're willing to boil the pasta. Again, only for about half the time you would normally boil pasta if you're planning on eating it. Make sure they're supervising you and it's cooled off enough for you to manipulate it before you grab it and start using it. Rinsing it in cold water is fine. It should be sticky but not mushy. So good luck making your design. I have the steps in pictures rather than trying to have you watch me do this. So again, I started with the cardboard, then I added the pasta, then I put the foil over it. I used a little bit of glue to get that foil to stick, and then I used the acrylic craft paint. If you don't have acrylic paint, you can try using a permanent marker or just leaving it shiny. So again, possibilities are up to you. If you don't want to use the pasta, anything that's has a texture to it but is somewhat flat, it's not sticking out too much, would work for this technique. So good luck, have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye.